What's up, co-reporters, and welcome back to my channel. It's time for a recap of what went down on this week's episode of the Family Chantel. So sorry I am a little bit late with this recap. I've been sick all weekend. I really wanted to be on camera for this because I just love this show so much, okay? Now, in episode 2, Chantel moves back into her parents' house because she and Pedro had decided to go ahead and list their marital home up for sale. And so, of course, it would be easier to show it and everything with her just moving out. So that's what she decided to do. And then she also decided to host a yard sale for Pedro's old stuff. And this, I'm sorry, was absolutely hilarious. I know that Chantel's mom, Karen, is problematic AF, especially with those R's that she keeps on rolling all the time. Divorce, you know, revenge. But she is just so hilarious to me nonetheless for the way that she sold that gaming chair of Pedro's for $1. They all knew Pedro loved that chair. He wanted to go back to that house just for the chair. He wanted Chantel to leave it behind. She and her mom said, absolutely F it not. We're going to sell it. And we're not going to sell it for a price that would be reasonable. We want to piss you the F off. So we're going to sell it for $1. And I say, you know what? Good for Pedro. Pedro should have thought about that chair when he walked into the realtor's office talking about, thank God we're divorcing. You really thought you were going to get some niceness or kindness out of Chantel after you did that to her? Please, I would have done the exact same thing. Okay, so good on them for selling it for so cheap. Now, another thing about Pedro, you know, it's just so crazy to me how you could do everything in the world to upgrade someone's life, change someone's life, and just help them out. And then they will act so ungrateful and like you never did a single damn thing for them, because there's a scene where Pedro says that Chantel never saw them as a team. And I'm like, I'm insulted, and I'm not even Chantel. Like, that girl worked multiple jobs to bring you here, to pay for your green card, to pay for your flight ticket. She helped send money back to your family, you know, your raggedy ass mom and sister and everything. And you're talking about she never saw you guys as a team? How freaking ungrateful do you have to be? Like, it is just insane to me, the audacity of this man to say that and to act like Chantel never worked. She just sat at home and wanted him to take care of her. Meanwhile, she was the husband and the wife for all of these years. It's ridiculous. I will say, though, that although Pedro's mom and sister Nicole, in my opinion, are at least slightly evil, they're not the only ones responsible for this divorce. Of course, Chantel and Pedro played a role as well, giving too much information to their families. And then both of them, the mom, the sister, and then Chantel's mom and dad and siblings. There was just too much meddling going on in this marriage. So, of course, it was bound to fall apart. Now, let's get into some shadiness, some shady green card activity meant to help harvest the American dollar, shall we? We get into this scene where Pedro's mom is taking an English class in the Dominican Republic. And she says that the reason she's taking these classes is that so that she can marry an American. And she's like, oh, they make like better husbands than Dominicans. They're more helpful. They're this, they're that. I'm like, girl, listen, there are so many countries in this world where people speak English, and you just so happen to want an American. Chantel's parents and family were right about you this entire time. You can go for a Canadian guy. You can go for an English guy, an Australian, a New Zealander. You can go for an Indian guy. Like 90% of those people speak English in India as well. You know what I mean? But you want an American? Girl, just say it. You want to harvest the American dollar, and this is the easiest way to do it, is to find a dumb American who is obsessed with Latin American women, though not obsessed enough to try to learn the language at all, like that bald guy, Scott, or whatever his name is, right? But yeah, like it looks like this was all part of their grand plan with Pedro to move to the U.S. as a family. And Pedro got his green card. Now it's up to the mom and sister to get theirs. Chantel also accuses Pedro of loving his gaming chair more than he loved her, because he FaceTimes her, talking about, where's my gaming chair? Where's my gaming chair? I don't see it. And then she's like, well, you know, it's gone. And so she's like, well, and I also think you loved your gaming chair more than you could have ever loved me. I'm sorry, but Pedro was absolutely hilarious in this scene. And I think he was serious too, when he was like, no, I loved you and my gaming chair equally. I laughed so freaking hard. I just love unintentionally funny moments. And this was one. He wasn't trying to have a moment. Like, I think he was really genuinely distraught over this chair. And that is just so hilarious to me. You know, like the last thing that Chantel wanted to hear as his fresh ex-wife is that she was just as loved as a chair. And apparently, like, Pedro made it seem like it was a super expensive chair, like $1,000 or something. But apparently it only cost like $75 or $80. Like, come on, Pedro, you've got the money to buy a new one. Like, go ahead, pawn off some of those garden tools if you have to, and you'll buy yourself a new chair in no time. Now, we get back into another special scene featuring Chantel's mom, Karen. And I gotta tell you, she has to be one of my favorite reality stars of all time. Like, she's just in like her bedroom doing some kind of Tai Chi or some kind of, you know, Tai Chi-like activity while Chantel is trying to sign this decree to get her last name back in the other room with her friend. And her friend is helping her because the mom is like over here trying to do this energy work or whatever. It is just so freaking hilarious to me. Chantel's asking her like for a pen, and she's like, okay, I'm coming. But she's got to finish this like Tai Chi or whatever thing it is that she's doing first. And it was just so hilarious. She says that she needs to do this to help her protect her kids against like negative energy or people or whatever. Now she goes to see a private investigator, I believe it is, and to see, like, you know, what Pedro has been up to, if he had been cheating, like what he's doing now that he's got his green card and everything. And so she's telling the private investigator that, like, Pedro had told her that this means war. And she just kept on repeating that. I was like, Karen, my problematic fave, like, please don't change. Like, you are just too much for me, and I love it. So meanwhile, Pedro returns to the Dominican Republic to visit with his family now that the divorce is finalized, and he feels like more safe in doing so. I guess while the divorce was still hanging in the balance, and like, you know, Chantel still had some kind of power over him in terms of his green card, he didn't feel like it was a good idea. But now that that's all said and done, he's ready. So his mother and sister start going on and on about how he needs more sexual experience since he's only ever really been intimate with Chantel. And I'm like, this is the weirdest thing ever. I think it's so strange that the mom and sister are so preoccupied with what he's sticking his penis into. You know what I mean? Like, this is just so highly inappropriate to me. And it reminds me of when they first came on the scene and everybody said, we think that Pedro is secretly married in the Dominican Republic and that Nicole is not his sister, but his wife. Because that does happen sometimes with these men. Okay, I've heard stories like this with Dominican men. So this was like this big story, you know what I mean? And it's not just Dominican men, but like men who use women for a green card in general. Sometimes they will, you know, they've already got this wife or this girl in the cut ready to come up to, you know, your country based off your green card that you get for this man. This happened to a friend of mine, by the way, but she canceled his green card before he could bring his real wife, girlfriend over. Long story. But anyway, like, it just reminds me of what people used to say in the conspiracy theories, that this is not his sister, this is his wife, because she's always been sexually inappropriate when it comes to her brother, you know? Now, Nicole insists on setting her up with like this friend of hers who's like a pageant girl, but something tells me that she's going to trick him. There is no pageant girl, and the girl is actually secretly Karima. And something else that was so funny to me was that they're in the Dominican Republic, right? And they're hanging with his mom and his friends. Everybody speaks Spanish in the DR. Her brother speaks Spanish, just like she speaks Spanish, but she keeps talking to him in English. I'm like, girl, like, what is this? Like, the other people who don't speak English here are just standing around like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, it just makes me laugh. One thing I didn't realize until I moved out of like an English-speaking country is how obsessed other countries are with English. Like, here in France, the way, or Paris, I should say, the way people go out of their way, like, just because they're dying to speak to you in English, like, they want to learn, they want to practice. It's crazy. You know, when I visit other countries, people are like that too. Like, they really want to learn. And I think this is the case with Nicole. She's done a really wonderful job of learning English. Her English is great, and she just wants to continue practicing it. But I found it to be super funny. Now, let's get into the mom's boyfriend, shall we? She had this boyfriend, Scott, and I love how she calls him Scott because it's just so Spanish. Like, Spanish people, they always put an E in front of an S. Like, I have a friend named Stella, and we have a Spanish friend, and whenever we hang out with a Spanish friend, she'll be like, Estella, Estella, and I think it's the cutest thing, you know? So she calls him Scott, and then, so we see these flashbacks of him and whatnot, and he's just like your typical, like, you know, ignorant guy who is obsessed with women from a certain culture, but he doesn't respect the culture enough to learn even a couple of words about it, you know, before traveling off to these like countries to meet the women, right? Because before he got with Lydia slash Pedro's mom, he had another woman who was Colombian. And then we find out that this fool brought his Colombian ex to the Dominican Republic when he visited Lydia, despite telling Lydia that he and this woman had been broken up for a long time. They hadn't spoken in a long time. Meanwhile, wow, look who pops up, you know, craziness. And I'm excited to see more of him because he's nuts. Didn't he like slam Pedro on the floor or something like that? Nicole also says that he was aggressive with her too. Like, he seems unhinged AF, and unhinged is exactly what I love on TV. So let's see how this goes. Though I don't appreciate him getting aggressive with, like, you know, his girlfriend's daughter. That's weird. Get aggressive with the son. He's grown, you know, and he deserves an ass whooping for what he did to Chantel. But leave the girls alone, okay? So yeah, anyway, we're going to find out a little bit more about what Pedro had been up to all this time. Like, had he been cheating on Chantel with Karaima? What is he doing in the DR? As Chantel's parents sit down with this private eye to get some more information on him. Dun, 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 dun. I'll see you guys next week for the recap on that, of course. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for your patience and hanging in there. And I really want to know what you guys thought about this episode. What were the standout moments to you? Like, what was hilarious? What was not so hilarious? What are you looking forward to? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as usual, we'll chat. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Have a great weekend.